Ember Hawthorne pushed her thin, 13-year-old frame deeper into the restaurant dumpster, ignoring the rotten smell that had become as familiar as breathing. Her stomach cramped with hunger, the kind that made her hands shake and her vision blur around the edges. She had been searching for scraps for over an hour, finding nothing but moldy bread and spoiled milk. Behind her, 8-year-old Junie coughed again, that wet, rattling sound that had been getting worse each day. Ember tried not to think about the flecks of blood she had seen that morning. Instead, she focused on digging through the garbage, hoping to find something, anything that could quiet the gnawing pain in their belly. A glint of light caught her eye from underneath a nearby car. Ember crawled toward it, her knees scraping against the rough asphalt. Her fingers closed around something smooth and cold. A phone. Not just any phone, but one of those expensive ones with the sleek black case and crystal-clear screen. The device lit up in her dirty hand, revealing dozens of urgent messages and missed calls. At the top of the screen, in bold letters, was a name that made her heart skip: Kelce. Ember's eyes widened as recognition hit her like a physical blow. Everyone knew that name. Everyone. She looked around the filthy alley where she and Junie had been sleeping in cardboard boxes for the past 3 weeks. Their clothes were torn and stained, hanging loose on their malnourished frames. Ember could not remember the last time she had felt truly warm or truly full. The phone in her hands probably cost more than she had ever seen in her entire life. The device vibrated against her palm, displaying another incoming call. Ember stared at the screen, her mind racing. She could sell this phone, buy food, medicine, maybe even find a warm place to sleep. Junie needed help desperately, and this could be their salvation. But she knew who it belonged to. She knew it was not hers to sell. Footsteps echoed from the mouth of the alley. Knox Fairbank, the security guard from the shopping center, appeared with his usual scowl. He had been chasing them away from different spots all week, treating them like pests rather than children. "Get out of here, you rats!" Knox shouted, his voice bouncing off the brick wall. "I told you kids to stay away from this area." Ember quickly shoved the phone into her torn backpack, her heart pounding. She helped Junie to her feet, steadying her swaying sister with gentle hand. Junie's skin felt hot and clammy, and her breathing was shallow and labored. As they hurried away from Knox's approaching footsteps, Ember felt the weight of the phone in her bag. The decision she had to make felt impossible. Save her dying sister or do the right thing. With tears streaming down her dirty cheeks, she realized she had never faced a choice that would define who she truly was until this moment. The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty streets as Ember sat on a bench outside the library, staring at the phone in her hand. She had been trying to figure out how to return it for hours, but every attempt led to the same dead end. The contacts were protected, the emergency information was locked, and she had no way to reach Kelce directly. Junie lay curled against her side, shivering despite the warm morning air. Her little sister's breathing had become more labored during the night, and Ember could see the exhaustion etched across her pale face. They had not eaten anything substantial in 3 days, surviving only on water from public fountains and the occasional discarded apple. "I am so hungry, Emmy," Junie whispered, using the nickname she had given her older sister years ago. "My tummy hurts so bad." Ember pulled her closer, fighting back tears. She had promised their mother before she died that she would take care of Junie, but she felt like she was failing every single day. The responsibility weighed on her shoulders like a crushing burden, made worse by the fact that she was still just a child herself. Desperation drove her to her feet. She walked the 6 blocks to downtown, where the restaurants and shops offered the best chance of finding work or food. The phone felt heavy in her backpack, a constant reminder of the choice she was avoiding. Cora Bramwell was sweeping the sidewalk in front of her small diner when Ember approached. The middle-aged woman had kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. She had noticed the 2 girls before, always together, always hungry, always trying to stay invisible. "Excuse me, ma'am," Ember said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was wondering if you might have any work I could do, just for some food scraps. I can sweep, clean tables, wash dishes. I am really good at washing dishes." Cora stopped sweeping and looked at the thin girl standing before her. Something in Ember's eyes, a mixture of pride and desperation, touched her heart. She had seen many homeless people over the years, but there was something different about this child. "What is your name, sweetheart?" Cora asked gently. Ember, and that is my sister Junie." She pointed to the small figure huddled on the bench across the street. Cora nodded slowly. "Well, Ember, I do have some floors that need sweeping and some tables that could use a good wipe down. Think you can handle that?" For the first time in days, Ember smiled. "Yes, ma'am. I can handle that." She worked for 3 hours straight, sweeping every inch of the diner floor, wiping down every table and chair, and organizing the condiment station. Her movements were efficient and careful, as if she understood the value of doing a job well. Cora watched her work with growing respect. When Ember finished, Cora handed her a bag containing 2 still warm sandwiches, a container of soup, and 2 bottles of water. "You did good work today, Ember. Real good work." Ember's eyes filled with tears as she clutched the bag. Thank you so much." She ran back to Junie, who perked up at the sight of the food. They ate slowly, savoring every bite of the turkey sandwiches and warm vegetable soup. For the first time in days, Ember felt something approaching hope. Maybe they could survive this. Maybe things would get better. But as evening approached, they made their way back to the alley where they'd been sleeping. Ember realized that Junie's condition had worsened significantly. Her little sister was burning with fever, and her cough now produced small flecks of blood. "Emmy, I do not feel good," Junie whispered, leaning heavily against her sister. "Everything hurts." Panic rose in Ember's chest. She helped Junie lie down on the cardboard they had arranged into a makeshift bed, then sat beside her, stroking her hair. The brief moment of hope from earlier in the day crumbled as she watched her sister struggle to breathe. The free clinic was 12 blocks away, but Ember knew she had to try. She helped Junie to her feet and half-carried her through the dark streets. The clinic was small and crowded, with a line of people waiting outside even though it was past closing time. Zara Caldwell, the night nurse, took one look at Junie and immediately brought them inside. She was a woman in her 40s, with tired eyes and gentle hands. She had been working at the free clinic for over a decade, and she recognized the signs of serious illness immediately. After examining Junie, Zara pulled Ember aside. Her expression was grave. "Your sister has pneumonia, and it is getting worse. She needs antibiotics, and she needs them tonight. But without insurance or money for the medication, I cannot help her here." "How much?" Ember asked, her voice barely audible. "The antibiotics alone would cost about $200, and she really should be in a hospital for monitoring and IV fluid." Ember felt the world spinning around her. $200 might as well have been $2 million. She looked at Junie, who was lying on the examination table with her eyes closed, her breathing rapid and shallow. "I will find a way," Ember whispered, more to herself than to Zara. "I have to find a way." As they walked back into the cold night air, Ember felt the phone in her backpack pressing against her spine. The temporary relief of the day's small victory had been replaced by a crushing realization that she might lose the only family she had left. The next morning brought no relief. Ember sat on the steps of the courthouse, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Help my sister, please," in careful block letters. Her pride fought against the humiliation of begging, but Junie's worsening condition left her no choice. People walked past without making eye contact, their footsteps echoing off the concrete. Occasionally, someone would drop a quarter or a dime into the small cup beside her, but after 4 hours, she had collected only $15.37. Junie lay curled on a bench nearby, covered by Ember's own thin jacket. Her fever had not broken, and she had barely eaten anything since the previous day. Every few minutes, she would be racked by violent coughing fits that left her gasping for air. "Hey, kid!" A voice made Ember look up. Dex Pembroke stood in front of her, a boy of about 16 with sharp eyes and expensive sneakers. She had seen him around the streets before, always with different groups of older kids who seemed to have more money than made sense. "You look like you could use some help," Dex said, crouching down to her level. "I know ways to make money fast, real money, enough to help your sister." Ember studied his face, sensing the danger beneath his friendly offer. "What kind of ways?" "Nothing too crazy. Just moving some packages from one place to another. Easy work, good pay. You could have that medicine money by tonight." The temptation was overwhelming. Ember looked at Junie, who was so still that for a moment she feared the worst. But something deep inside her, maybe her mother's voice or her own moral compass, made her shake her head. "No, thank you. I will find another way." Dex shrugged and walked away, leaving Ember alone with her desperation and her principle. She spent the rest of the day moving from corner to corner, trying to find places where people might be more generous. By evening, she had managed to collect $23, still far from the $200 she needed. That night, as they huddled in their cardboard shelter, Junie's condition took a dramatic turn for the worse. She began having trouble breathing, her small chest rising and falling rapidly as she struggled to get enough air. Her skin felt like fire under Ember's touch. "Emmy," Junie whispered, her voice barely audible. "I am scared." "It is okay, Junie. I am here. I am not going anywhere." Ember held her sister close, feeling helpless as Junie's breathing became more labored. Around midnight, Junie suddenly went limp in Ember's arms. For a terrifying moment, Ember thought she had lost her, but then she felt the faint flutter of breath against her cheek. Junie had fainted from fever and exhaustion. Ember scooped up her unconscious sister and ran through the empty streets toward the hospital. Junie felt impossibly light in her arms, and her breathing was so shallow that Ember had to keep checking to make sure she's still alive. The emergency room was bright and sterile, filled with the sounds of machines beeping and people moving with urgent purpose. Ember burst through the automatic doors, shouting for help. "Please, someone help us! My sister is really sick!" A nurse looked up from her station, took one look at Junie, and immediately called for a doctor. They placed Junie on a gurney and began examining, asking Ember rapid-fire questions about symptoms and medical history. "Does she have insurance?" the admitting clerk asked. "No, but please, she needs help right now. I will pay somehow. I will find a way." The doctor, a tired-looking man in his 50s, pulled Ember aside after examining Junie. "She has severe pneumonia and is dangerously dehydrated. She needs immediate treatment, but hospital policy requires payment arrangement or insurance verification before we can admit her." "I have $23, Ember said, pulling out her crumpled bills. "It is not much, but it is everything I have." The doctor's expression softened, but he shook his head. "I am sorry, but that is not enough. Without insurance or a substantial payment, we cannot admit her. You can try the free clinic, but they close at 6. Ember felt her world collapsing. She is going to die without help. "Please, I am begging you. I am truly sorry," the doctor said, and Ember could see that he meant it. "But my hands are tied by hospital policy." Security guards escorted them out, and Ember found herself back on the cold sidewalk, holding her unconscious sister and feeling completely abandoned by the world. She sat on the curb, rocking Junie gently, watching her labored breathing, and feeling utterly powerless. Cars passed by, their headlights briefly illuminating the two girls before disappearing into the night. No one stopped. No one cared. Ember had never felt so alone in her life. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the phone, its screen still gleaming despite everything they had been through. The device represented a way out, a solution to their desperate situation. All she had to do was sell it. But as she stared at the phone, she heard her mother's voice in her memory. "Being poor does not mean you have to be a thief, Emmy. Always remember who you are, no matter what." Across the street, Sage Whitmore watched from the shadow. She was a volunteer at the local homeless shelter, and she had been tracking the two girls for weeks, trying to find a way to help them. But the system was overwhelmed, and resources were limited. She felt helpless watching their struggle, knowing that bureaucracy and lack of funding meant these children would continue to suffer. Ember looked down at Junie, whose breathing was becoming more and more labored. She made a decision that would define the rest of her life. Instead of selling the phone, she held it close to her heart and whispered, "I am going to find another way, Junie. I promise." The night grew colder, and Ember pulled her sister closer, both of them shivering on the empty sidewalk. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she would face it with her integrity intact. 3 days passed in a blur of desperation and exhaustion. Ember had tried everything she could think of, begging at different locations, asking for work at every business within walking distance, even searching through more dumpsters hoping to find something valuable to sell. Nothing had worked. Junie was getting worse by the hour. Her fever would not break, and she had stopped eating entirely. She spent most of her time unconscious, waking only to cough up blood before drifting back into a restless sleep. Ember knew they were running out of time. On the 4th morning, Ember made the decision to return to the alley where she had found the phone. She did not have a clear plan, but something drew her back to that spot. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the need to be somewhere that felt connected to a possible solution. She sat on the same piece of cardboard, where they had been sleeping, holding Junie in her arms. Her sister's breathing was so shallow that Ember had to keep checking to make sure she was still alive. The phone sat in her lap, its screen dark and silent. Around noon, a black SUV pulled up to the alley entrance. Ember tensed, ready to run if it was Knox or someone else who would chase them away. But instead, a man got out and began walking slowly through the alley, looking carefully at the ground as if he was searching for something. He was tall and athletic, wearing simple jeans and a hoodie that did not immediately scream wealth or fame. But something about the way he moved, the confidence in his posture, made Ember's heart race. As he got closer, she realized who he was. Kelce stopped when he saw the two girls huddled against the brick wall. He took in their obvious distress, the way the older girl was protectively cradling the younger one, and the desperate look in her eye. For a moment, he forgot about the phone entirely. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, approaching slowly as if he were dealing with frightened animals. Ember stared at him, her mind racing. This was her chance. She could return the phone, maybe even ask for help, but the words stuck in her throat. What if he thought she had stolen it? What if he called the police? "My sister is sick," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kelce crouched down to their level, his expression growing concerned as he got a closer look at Junie. The little girl was clearly very ill, her skin pale and clammy, her breathing labored and irregular. "How long has she been like this?" he asked. 4 days, maybe 5. "It is hard to keep track." Ember's voice broke as she spoke. "Have you taken her to a doctor?" Ember's laugh was bitter and short. "We tried. They said we need money or insurance. We do not have either." Kelce studied the two girls for a long moment. He could see the exhaustion in Ember's eyes, the way she held her sister with fierce protectiveness, and the obvious desperation of their situation. Something about it reminded him of his own childhood, though those memories were ones he rarely allowed himself to revisit. "I am looking for something," he said carefully. "A phone. I lost it around here a few days ago." Ember's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. With trembling hands, she reached into her backpack and pulled out the device. The screen lit up as she handed it to him, displaying all the missed calls and messages she had seen that first day. "Is this yours?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Kelce took the phone, relief flooding his features. "Yes, this is mine, thank you." But instead of leaving, he continued to study the two girls. "You could have sold it. It is worth a lot of money." "I know," Ember said simply, "but it was not mine to sell." "Even though your sister needs medicine? Even though it could have saved her life?" Ember was quiet for a long moment. "My mom always said that being poor does not mean you have to be a thief. She said that how you act when no one is watching is who you really are." Kelce felt something shift inside his chest. He had been famous for years, surrounded by people who wanted something from him, who saw him as a means to an end. But this 13-year-old girl, who had every reason to steal from, had chosen honesty instead. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ember, and this is my sister Junie." "Well, Ember," Kelce said, his voice gentle but firm, "I think it is time we got Junie to a doctor who can actually help her." Ember looked at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Why would you help us? You do not even know us." Kelce was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. "Because someone who returns a phone when they desperately need the money it could bring is someone worth helping, and because every child deserves a chance to be healthy and safe." He stood up and extended his hand to Ember. "Come on, let us get your sister the help she needs." For the first time in days, Ember allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The private medical clinic was unlike anything Ember had ever seen. Clean white walls, soft lighting, and the quiet hum of expensive equipment created an atmosphere of competence and care. She sat in a comfortable chair beside Junie's bed, watching as doctors and nurses moved with calm efficiency. Junie had been given IV antibiotics and fluid, and for the first time in days, her breathing was beginning to sound less labored. The doctors had confirmed what Ember had feared, severe pneumonia that would have been fatal without immediate treatment. Kelce had handled everything quietly and efficiently, speaking to the medical staff and taking care of the financial arrangements without making a big show of it. He had insisted on staying until they knew Junie was stable, despite the fact that he had missed several important meetings. "She is going to be fine," Dr. Martinez told Ember as she finished her examination. "The antibiotics are working, and her fever is coming down. She will need to stay here for a few days for monitoring, but she should make a full recovery. Ember felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you so much. After the medical team left, Kelce pulled a chair up beside Ember. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching Junie sleep peacefully for the first time in days. The machines beeped rhythmically, creating a steady soundtrack of hope that was foreign to Ember's ears. As the afternoon wore on, Ember found herself watching other families in the clinic. She saw parents who took for granted the ability to walk into a medical facility and get help for their children. She observed the casual way they handled paperwork, insurance cards appearing effortlessly from wallets, signatures scrawled without the weight of impossible debt. "You are thinking very hard about something," Kelce observed. Ember nodded toward the hallway, where a mother was casually chatting with a nurse, while her son got his cast checked. "I was just thinking about how different their world is from ours. They do not even think twice about bringing their kids here when they are hurt." "I remember that feeling," Kelce said quietly, watching other families and wondering what it would be like to live without constant worry. "I need to tell you something," Kelce said finally. "When I was about your age, I was homeless too." Ember looked at him with surprise. "Really?" Kelce's eyes grew distant, and she could see him traveling back to memories he rarely visited. "My mom was addicted to drugs, and we got evicted from our apartment. We lived in our car for a while, then in shelter, then on the streets. I know what it feels like to be hungry and cold and scared." "Tell me about it," Ember said softly, "if you want." Kelce was quiet for a long moment, then began to speak in a voice barely above a whisper. "I remember being 9 years old and spending an entire winter night in a 24-hour laundromat because it was warm and the owner did not kick us out. My mom would sit in a plastic chair, nodding off from whatever she had taken, and I would curl up between two dryers and pretend I was at home in my own bed." Ember felt her throat tighten. "That sounds terrible." "The worst part was not the cold or the hunger, though those were bad enough. The worst part was the shame. I would lie to teachers about why I did not have lunch money or why my clothes smelled. I became an expert at making up stories about why I could not have friends over to my house. How long did it last? 2 years. 2 years of moving from place to place, never knowing where we would sleep or when we would eat. My mom would disappear for days, and I would have to figure out how to survive on my own." Ember watched Junie's peaceful face as she listened. "What happened? How did you get out?" Kelce leaned back in his chair, his expression distant as he remembered. "A teacher at school noticed that I was wearing the same clothes every day and that I was always hungry, Mrs. Patterson. She started bringing me extra lunches and staying after school to help me with homework, not because I needed academic help, but because she knew I had nowhere else to go. She sounds nice, more than nice. She saved my life. One day, she sat me down and said she knew what was happening at home. I was terrified she would call social service and I would be taken away from my mom, even though my mom was barely taking care of me. Did she call them? Eventually, yes. But first, she helped me understand that accepting help was not giving up on my mom. It was giving myself a chance to become someone who could maybe help her later, when I was stronger. And did you help her later? Kelce's expression grew sad. "She died of an overdose when I was 17. By then, I was in a good foster home and doing well in school. I tried to help her, but addiction is a disease that has to be fought by the person who has it. I could not fight it for her." Ember felt tears in her eyes. "I am sorry. Thank you. The point is, Mrs. Patterson did not just help me academically, or even just help me find a safe place to live. She helped me understand that my worth as a person was not determined by my circumstances." "Is that why you helped us?" "Partly, but mostly because of what you did. You had every reason to sell that phone, every justification in the world, but you chose to do the right thing anyway. That tells me something about who you are." Ember was quiet for a moment. "I was not always honest. Before my mom died, I stole food sometimes when we were really hungry. I told myself it was okay because we needed it. And how did that make you feel? Terrible. Like I was becoming someone my mom would not recognize. That is why, when I found your phone, I knew I could not sell it. Not because selling it would have been wrong for anyone else, but because it would have been wrong for me. And now I think my mom was right. Being poor does not mean you have to be a thief. It just means you have to be more creative about surviving." Kelce smiled at that. "Your mom sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. She died of cancer 6 months ago. The doctors could have helped her, but we did not have insurance then either. Ember's voice was matter-of-fact, but Kelce could hear the pain underneath. "I am sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult." It was. But she taught me that how you handle the difficult times is what defines you. Not what happens to you, but how you respond. They sat in silence again, both lost in their own thoughts. Kelce was struggling with something, and Ember could sense his internal conflict. During the second day of Junie's stay, Ember found herself walking the halls of the clinic during visiting hours. She was not used to having so much time to just think, without the constant pressure of finding food or shelter. The luxury of contemplation was both a relief and a burden. She passed by other rooms and caught glimpses of different stories. In one room, an elderly man was surrounded by what appeared to be 3 generations of his family, all laughing at something he had said. In another, a young mother was reading a picture book to her toddler, who was recovering from some minor procedure. But it was the room at the end of the hall that stopped her in her track. Through the partially open door, she could see a boy about her own age lying alone in bed, staring at the ceiling. No visitors, no flowers, no signs that anyone cared about his recovery. Without really thinking about it, Ember pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. "Hi," she said softly. The boy turned his head toward her, surprise flickering across his face. "Hi, are you lost?" "No, my sister is in room 12. I saw you were alone and thought maybe you would want some company." The boy's expression softened. "I am Marcus, and yeah, company would be nice." "I am Ember. What are you here for?" "Broken ribs. Got beat up pretty bad." Marcus said it casually, but Ember could see the pain in his eyes that had nothing to do with physical injury. "Do you have family coming to visit?" Marcus shook his head. "Foster family. They dropped me off and said they would pick me up when I am ready to be discharged. They are not bad people, but they are not really family either, you know?" Ember knew exactly what he meant. "Yeah, I know." They talked for almost an hour, and Ember found herself sharing parts of her story that she had never told anyone except Junie. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally nodding in understanding. When visiting hours ended, she promised to come back the next day. "Why did you do that?" Kelce asked, when she told him about meeting Marcus. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone and scared in a place like this, and because talking to him reminded me that there are other kids out there who need help too. I want to help you," Kelce said finally that evening. "But I do not want to just throw money at the problem. I want to help in a way that actually makes a difference." "What do you mean?" "There are programs for kids in your situation. Good programs that can help you get back on your feet, go to school, have a real future. But you would have to be willing to accept help." Ember bristled slightly. "I do not want charity." "It is not charity. It is an investment. In you, in your future, in the person you could become. Someone who returns a phone when they desperately need money is someone worth investing in." "But why? Why do you care what happens to us?" Kelce thought about his answer carefully. "Because I believe that everyone deserves a chance. Because I was lucky enough to get help when I needed it. And now I am in a position to help others. And because I see something in you that reminds me of myself at your age." "What do you see?" "Strength. Integrity. The kind of person who does the right thing even when it costs them everything. The kind of person who would stop to comfort a stranger in a hospital room." Ember looked at her sleeping sister, then back at Kelce. "What would happen to Junie?" "We have to stay together." "Of course. There are programs specifically designed for siblings. You would not be separate. And I would not have to pretend to be grateful all the time? I could just be myself?" Kelce laughed softly. "Especially that. The world needs more people who are willing to be themselves, even when it is difficult." Ember was quiet for a long time, weighing his words. "I need to think about it. This is all happening so fast." "Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." As if on cue, Junie stirred in her bed, opening her eyes for the first time in hours. "Emmy, where are we?" "We are at a hospital, Junie. You are going to be okay." Junie smiled weakly. "I feel better." The scary coughing stopped. Ember squeezed her sister's hand. "Yes, it did. You are going to be just fine." "Who is that man?" Junie whispered, looking at Kelce with curious but tired eyes. "This is Kelce. He is the one who brought us here and made sure you got the medicine you needed." Junie studied Kelce for a moment, then said with the directness that only children possess, "Thank you for helping Emmy take care of me. She tries really hard, but sometimes she needs help too." Kelce felt his throat tighten. "You are very welcome, Junie." And you are right about your sister. She does try very hard. She is the best sister in the whole world, Junie said seriously. She always shares her food with me, even when there is not very much. And she reads me stories from memory when we do not have books. What kind of stories? Kelce asked. Stories about brave princesses who do not need to be rescued because they rescue themselves. And stories about sisters who take care of each other no matter what. Ember felt tears threatening again. Junie, you need to rest. I know, but I wanted to tell him about how good you are, Emmy. Sometimes I think you forget. As Junie drifted back to sleep, Kelce looked at Ember with something approaching awe. She is right, you know. You do not seem to realize how extraordinary you are. I am just doing what anyone would do. No, Ember. Most people would not do what you have done. Most people would have sold that phone, and most people would not have the strength to keep going through what you have been through. And most people certainly would not stop to comfort a lonely kid in a hospital room when they have their own problems to worry about. Looking at her sister's improving condition and thinking about Kelce's offer, Ember realized that maybe accepting help was not the same as giving up. Maybe it was just another way of being strong. Over the next few days, as Junie continued to recover, Ember found herself talking more and more with Kelce about the future. He told her about the Riverside Children's Center, a residential program that helped kids transition from homelessness to stability. It was not just a place to live, but a community where children could heal, learn, and grow. The most important thing, Kelce explained, is that you would have choice. You could decide what you want to study, what activities you want to try, what kind of person you want to become. No one would make those decisions for you. The idea of having choices was almost foreign to Ember. For so long, her only choice had been survival. But maybe, just maybe, there could be more. I want to visit Marcus before we leave, Ember said on Junie's last day at the clinic. Of course, Kelce said. I will wait here with Junie. When Ember knocked on Marcus's door, she found him sitting up in bed, looking much better than when she had first met him. Hey, she said, I wanted to say goodbye. We are leaving today. That is great. Is your sister okay? She is going to be fine. What about you? When do you get out? Tomorrow. Back to the foster house. Marcus tried to sound casual, but Ember could hear the resignation in his voice. Marcus, can I tell you something? He nodded. A few days ago, I did not think there was any hope for me and my sister. I thought we were going to die on the streets, and nobody would care. But sometimes, help comes from places you do not expect. Sometimes, people surprise you. What are you saying? I am saying that maybe your story is not over yet. Maybe there are people out there who will care about you, who will see what I see in you. What do you see in me? Someone who has been hurt, but is not bitter. Someone who listened to my story without judging me. Someone worth caring about. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Thanks, Ember. I hope things work out for you and your sister. They will. And they will for you, too. As they walked out of the clinic, Junie holding Ember's hand and Kelce carrying their few belongings, Ember felt something she had not experienced in months. Hope for the future. Not just hope for survival, but hope for something better. Something worth building. She thought about Marcus, about all the other kids like them who were fighting their own battle. Maybe someday, when she was stronger and more established, she could help them too. Maybe that was part of what her mother had meant about how you respond to difficult times, defining who you are. Are you ready for this? Kelce asked as they approached his car. Ember looked at Junie, who was practically bouncing with excitement at the prospect of a real bed and regular meal. She thought about the Riverside Children's Center, about the possibility of going to school and having a normal childhood, even if it was starting later than... Yes, she said, and meant it. I think I am ready. 6 months later, Ember sat in a bright classroom at the Riverside Children's Center, helping a group of 7-year-olds with their reading homework. The center had become more than just a place to live. It had become home in every sense of the word. Miss Ember, said a little boy named Marcus, tugging on her sleeve. I do not understand this. Sound it out, Ember encouraged, pointing to the letters. What does this part say? As Marcus worked through the word, Ember marveled at how much her life had changed. She and Junie shared a comfortable room with real beds, clean sheets, and windows that let in morning sunlight. They had 3 nutritious meals a day, access to medical care, and most importantly, they were both thriving in school. Junie had recovered completely from her pneumonia and was excelling in her 2nd grade class. She had gained weight. Her color had returned to a healthy pink, and she laughed more than she had since their mother died. Watching her sister play with other children and discover the joy of learning filled Ember with a happiness she had not thought possible during those dark days on the streets. "I got it!" Marcus exclaimed, successfully reading the word. "It says, butterfly." "Excellent job," Ember said, giving him a high five. "You are getting so good at reading." After the tutoring session ended, Ember walked through the halls of the center, greeting staff members and other residents. She had naturally emerged as a leader among the children, not because she was one of the oldest, but because of her quiet strength and her ability to help others work through their problem. Dr. Sarah Chen, the program director, stopped her in the hallway. "Ember, I wanted to talk to you about something exciting. We have had some visitors today who specifically asked to meet you." "Visitors?" "Representatives from the Metropolitan School District. They have been following your academic progress, and they want to offer you a full scholarship to attend their advanced placement program next year." Ember's eyes widened in disbelief. "A scholarship? For me? You have been testing at the top of your class in every subject. Your teachers say you have a natural gift for helping other students understand difficult concepts. They believe you have exceptional potential. But I missed so much school when we were living on the streets. I thought I would never catch up." Dr. Chen smiled warmly. "Sometimes life experiences teach us things that cannot be learned from textbooks. You have developed wisdom, resilience, and empathy that most people your age simply do not possess. Those qualities, combined with your intelligence, make you truly special." That evening, Ember sat in the center's comfortable common room, helping Junie with her creative writing homework. Her sister was working on an assignment about personal heroes, and she had chosen to write about Ember. "Read me what you have written so far," Ember said, settling beside her sister on the soft couch. Junie cleared her throat and began to read in her clear, confident voice. "My hero is my big sister, Emmy. She took care of me when I was really sick, and we did not have a home. She found a very expensive phone that belonged to someone famous, and she could have sold it to buy food and medicine for me. But she did not sell it because it was not hers. She always does the right thing, even when it is really hard. That is why she is my hero." Ember felt tears prick her eyes. "Junie, that is beautiful writing. Is it true that you could have sold the phone and bought my medicine?" "Yes, it is true. Why did you not sell it?" Ember thought carefully about how to explain such a complex moral decision to her 8-year-old sister. "Because sometimes doing the right thing is the only way to remember who you really are, when everything else is taken away from you. Your home, your security, even your hope. Your character is the one thing that truly belongs to you." But what if I had died because you did not sell it? It was a question that had haunted Ember for months, one she had discussed extensively with the counselors at the center. "That would have been the most terrible thing in the world, Junie. But even then, I would rather have lost everything than lose myself." Junie nodded solemnly, as if she understood something profound. "I think Mom would be proud of you. I think she'd be proud of both of us." Later that evening, Kelce arrived for one of his regular visits. He had been true to his word, staying involved in their lives without being intrusive. He attended Ember's school event, celebrated Junie's achievement, and had become something like the father figure they had never really had. "I heard about the scholarship," he said, settling into a chair across from the sister. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared," Ember admitted. "Excited, but also scared. What if I am not smart enough? What if I do not belong there? Do you remember what you told me about character being the one thing that truly belongs to you?" Ember nodded. "Intelligence is important, but character is what will carry you through the difficult time. And you, Ember Hawthorne, have more character than anyone I have ever met. Even adults? Especially adults. Most people never face the kind of choice you that day in the alley. And most, if they did face it, would not make the choice you made." Ember looked around the comfortable room, at her healthy sister doing homework, at the man who had become their unexpected guardian angel. "Do you think everything happens for a reason?" Kelce considered the question carefully. "I think we create the reason. I think you finding my phone was random chance. But what you did with that chance, that was all you. You chose to be honest, when dishonesty would have been easy. You chose to trust, when you had every reason to be suspicious. You chose hope, when despair would have been more realistic. And because of those choices, Junie got better, and we found a home. And now I have a chance at a real education. Yes, but most importantly, you discovered something about yourself. that no one can ever take away from you. What is that? That you are exactly the person your mother raised you to be. That being poor never made you less than anyone else. That your integrity is worth more than money, more than security, more than anything else in this world. Ember felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of completeness she had never experienced before. She looked at Junie, now healthy and happy, working diligently on her homework. She thought about the scholarship opportunity, the chance to build a future she had never dared to imagine. But mostly, she thought about that moment in the alley when she had held Kelce'S phone in her hands and made a choice that defined her forever. Standing up, she walked to the window and looked out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, other children were facing impossible choices, struggling to survive while holding on to their humanity. Honesty is not about having much or having little, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. It is about who you choose to be when no one is watching, and when you have every reason in the world to choose differently. Sometimes, doing the right thing is the only thing that remains when everything else is stripped away. And I have learned that sometimes it is also the only thing we need to remember who we really are. Kelce and Junie listened in respectful silence as Ember spoke, both understanding that they were witnessing something profound. The moment when a young girl who had been tested by the harshest circumstances life could offer stood tall in the knowledge that she had not just survived, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. The phone that had started it all sat in a drawer in her room, a reminder not of what she could have gained by betraying her principles, but of what she had discovered by staying true to them. It was, she knew, the most valuable thing she had ever found.